Whether at home or work, life is about relationships. Welcome to Small Change, Big Dividends with your host, Branch Isole. Small Change, Big Dividends shares steps, tools, and tips for personal career and spiritual growth. So please welcome the host of Small Change, Big Dividends, Branch Isole.
At issue within our world is a misunderstanding, a misjudgment, you might say, because there seems to be a belief that solutions can be found for the world's escalating problems. The truth is, they can't. So we must ask why. What's missing? You see, the more problems we face, and most of the problems we face, are human-made or caused. And for that reason, there are no methods nor means to simply eradicate problems, whatever they may be. This is a simple truth. Many people miss that our world has been created to establish acknowledgement of God and that His purpose for humanity is to know that He is, that He exists. Once we accept this factual premise, we begin to see the world as it truly is, a place where corruption, greed, lust, and evil make a home. But even with all this negativity of actions in our world, it's still a place of opportunities. Opportunities for each of us to come from our higher self and respond morally and ethically to the dilemmas, the people, the circumstances, and events in daily life. This understanding allows us to extricate ourselves from the mundane and the time-consuming stress, struggle, and conflict being created within our relationships. You see, when we learn how to respond appropriately, meaning morally and ethically, we discover a world worth living in and contributing to. So, what's missing? Stay tuned to find out. Coming to you from deep in the forest, near the banks of the Ouachita River, this is Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. Small Changes, Big Dividend is a show where your questions are part of the program. So if you have a question, you can call during our live show to our toll-free number, 1-866-451-1451, or you can email to my website anytime during the week, and we'll read your question and answer it on air. Thanks for joining me today. Each week, I share mana'o with listeners from around the world. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we talk about personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. Today, I'm going to share some small changes that can pay big dividends in your relationships and in your life. Because whether at home or work, life is about relationships. But it's healthy relationships that encourage and embrace growth. We currently live in the most advanced, informed, and complex world in human history. So what's missing? We know more, do more, and engage in more work, more leisure activities, and more interactions than ever before. So what's missing? We have more mental exigent processes and more spiritually practiced modalities reaching more people across the globe than ever before in human history. So, what's missing? We have more media outlets, podcasts, methods, and modes of communication to offer and disseminate more avenues of knowledge, experience, entertainment, than ever before. So, what is missing? Except through the power of technology, the ways and means of human behavior really haven't changed much over the last 5,000 years. I'm sure you've heard or been part of discussions about balance in life, home and career balance, mental and physical balance, community and personal balance. But what about your spiritual balance? And by that, I mean balance between your physical, mental, and spiritual being. Now, you may be saying, I'm just not spiritual, or I'm not spiritually inclined. And that certainly may be true. But in spite of this contention, you have within you a spirit of origination. And you've had this spirit from birth. You see, all living creatures have the Spirit of God within them from birth. That's just a simple truth. You may be asking, well, how can this be? Whether you believe in God or not, the universe evolved from a process initiated and supported by intelligent design from and through the Spirit of God. You don't believe me? Well, have you ever seen a movie or heard a story that brought you to tears? What about one that caused you to have a swelling of emotion in your heart, in your mind, in your throat, or your stomach? How about one that produced a needle prick to your consciousness? Have you ever witnessed someone or something that caused you to respond emotionally, even uncontrollably emotionally? Well, where do you think this emotion comes from? And more important, who put it there, when, and why? You see, the emotions I'm describing are involuntary, meaning they happen as an involuntary reaction. Oftentimes, whether we're really ready for them or not. And they're most often initiated by someone or something external that affects us internally in mind and body. These are emotions that well up inside, producing an awareness of their onset presence. And they can affect us and others in similar ways from the same stimulus, usually through a story, a movie, a play, or some collective activity. Now, think of a sports victory against a rival. Well, likewise, in addition to these involuntary emotions, there are three other emotions that are also internal, but in most cases affect only us. I'm talking about guilt, shame, and embarrassment. You see, these three are emotional responses as well, but they're responses to actions or reactions that are not in our best interests. These are ones that most often cause guilt, shame, or embarrassment. And they're the ones that cause us to question or doubt the decisions or choices we've made. You see, it's these three emotions that indict us for actions we've taken at the expense, the damage, or the despair of another's emotions, well being, or presence. No matter which set of emotions we're confronted with, those external that affect us internally, or those internal that affect our external world and the people in it, they are all rooted in our spirit of origination, the spirit that is you, the one that came from God as creator. This is the spirit that dwells in your soul, housed by your body, connected to your conscience and your subconscious mind. But again, what's missing? What's missing is our acknowledgement that we were, in our origination, and still are, in our human experience, connected to God. But how do we know this to be so? How can we know this is true? Well, at some point in your life, you turned to God and asked Him a question. In that moment, your question indicated you believe that God exists. Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked him. It's this simple acknowledgement that verifies your belief that God is real, that God exists. And from that moment on, this simple acknowledgement challenges you in daily life through stress, struggle, and conflicts, in relationships at home, at work, or at play. A survey was done and people were asked about their biggest regrets. Do you know that the majority of disappointments involved and revolved around emotional harm? Harm to themselves and harm to the people that they claim to love or care about. So, what does this tell us? It says that the lingering regrets most people experience are recurring cycles of actions and reactions, followed by recriminations of self for those actions. They then went on to describe harm that was then followed by emotionally beating oneself up over that action, followed then by beating oneself up again for not realizing the harm that had been caused. And so the cycle continued. The truth is, most people stay in this cycle, continuing to dig deeper, the holes of despair, anger, and frustration. You see, when we dig holes of adversity, it's difficult to climb out. And we begin the growth process of becoming a better person against our own odds. So, why is this so? What's missing? Well, we're going to find out right after our first commercial break. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. And today we're talking about balance, stability, calm, and peace. You see, on every life stage, these four are always waiting in the wings, waiting to be revealed, waiting to become part of an active life. If we will remove the veil that obscures these four from our view. You see, it's when we realize our world is designed to blur, to obstruct, or to dim the truth, we also realize that the truth is always there. But we must seek it out first for it to become real and active in our life. So, how do we remove this veil that we might see behind it and therefore discover what the key is for this veil's removal and the rewards that are holding inside behind it? As mentioned, we are each a spiritual entity in our origination, meaning we're a combination of a spiritual seed and an electrical charge unit of energy from within the universe. These two together are our spirit of origination, which, once united, is eternal. A spiritual seed and cosmic electrical energy charge created by the Spirit of God. And when we're born, we're a combination of mind, body, soul, and spirit. And we are born in perfect balance until our first breath. And with that breath, our balance is disrupted. As we become part of this world, our world, and the struggle begins. It's amazing as I scroll through my social media accounts to see the overwhelming numbers of motivational quotes and sayings, along with scattered Bible passages and references, mixed in with an ever-exploding number of general feel-good nuances that are posted daily. Believe me, far too many to count. Massive quantities of positive vibes, fist bumping, thumbs up, attaboy, attagirl, go get 'em, encouragements, all intoned with success. You can persevere, you can excel, you can defy all the odds, and become a seven-figure income superstar. And yet, among the plethora of these sayings and quotes bandied about as postmodern philosophies, few actually give guidance that's grounded in truth. You see, having survived past empires, from Nimrod to the Egyptians, from the Assyrians to the Babylonians, from the Greeks and the Romans, through the Dark Ages, through the Renaissance, into and through the ages of reason and enlightenment, up to and including the colonial, industrial, and post-industrial empires, what's not been missing through all of those thousands of years is deceit and deception. Believe me, it's alive and well and extensively practiced in and across our 21st century global landscape. Full of lies, falsehoods, fabrications, fake and purposed misdirection, all knocking at our doors and knocking at our minds every minute of every day. Watch any news cycle, any media network for one day, and our opening statements of today's episode are borne out. So what's missing? What's missing is a desire to actually change. But can the world be changed as idealists, activists, hard-charging progressives, and good-natured media talking heads, or well-meaning podcasts with their certified life coaches and tales of overcoming adversities? Sadly, the answer is no. Why? Because the world's ways are inculcated into each of us from birth, with every member of every society that encourages and promotes digging deeper the holes of oppression and inequality. These are and have been the ways of the world since its beginning. So what's the answer? What's promoted incessantly today across every channel or avenue of communication? It's today's preferred or proffered methods or beliefs, like self-love, knowledge and practice spirituality, whims, hopes, and dreams, plans and schemes, and cons and conspiracies, all wrapped up in idols, idolatry, and celebrity. You see, our interconnected internet world offers master classes in everything under the sun, except a simple and true non-accusatorial path. Have you ever wondered whether or not Bible scripture is right, or true, or real, or believable? You see, I'm often asked, how can I believe the veracity of Bible text? Well, my answer is the words of Christ. Unequivocally stated, through all of history, from every near or distant place on earth, from every philosopher, guru, shaman, or life coach, from every religious or cult leader, every priest, pastor, pope, imam, or rabbi, from every seer, sage, and oracle. There's been only one person who could share words and teach principles and compassionately answer every question asked. Only one person with responses and replies for every situation where every word was true, where every principle of instruction was directly linked to every other truth known, taught, or recorded. Only one person with wisdom applicable to everyone who ever lived. Point to one other person who has ever walked on this planet, master, teacher, philosopher, enlightened individual, whose words explained and taught the relationship between each of us and God and the relationship between each of us with one another, as succinctly, as effortlessly, or as completely. Point to one other person who ever lived who spoke and taught how and why truth and love, expressed as moral and ethical behavior, could be attained and practiced in every situation, within every and any human endeavor, to be used by anyone who might desire to hear and then actually practice these instructive gems. No other person who ever lived spoke or taught as God Himself would or does, with love, compassion, mercy, understanding, and most of all, forgiveness. None, not one, in all of humanity's evolutionary journey, except Jesus of Nazareth 2,000 years ago. You see, belief in Jesus as the Christ, as the Messiah, as God incarnate is a choice. It's as simple as that. And someday, today, maybe tomorrow, at some point between right now and the day of your last breath, you'll have an opportunity to trust your spirit of origination, the you that lives in your heart and mind and is the essence of who you are from and by the power of God's Spirit. You'll have to decide if Jesus is the one He says He is or not. You see, if you want balance in your life, you must establish balance between the human you and the spiritual you, because both realms exist, the human and the spiritual. If you're only living in one, in the human realm, you're missing a fundamental purpose of why we are each here. So if you truly wish to become complete, to be whole, to be all you can be, then you must fully be mind, body, soul, and spirit. We're going to take our second commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be looking at how we can start or restart a spiritual relationship with the Lord. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. I'm often asked how to start or restart a spiritual relationship with God through Jesus Christ. It's an easy answer, and it's an easy process. Why? Because God demands nothing of us throughout our entire life. He does, however, require that before we take our last breath, we must decide whether or not we will believe and trust that Jesus was and is the Christ, the Messiah. The individuals, His apostles and disciples, claimed Him to be, the one God Himself declared Him to be. You see, we can conjure up every excuse, every exception, every possibility about the plan for our existence. We can rationalize and fabricate, come up with any alternative deity, from wood to stone to crystals to minerals to animals to extraterrestrials, from every animate or inanimate object, and most often to the little god of self inside of each of us. From Vishnu and Krishna to Buddha and Muhammad, from Moses and Confucius to Nanak and Singh, to the Taoist, to the Shintoist, from the atheists to the Zoroastrians. Not one of these religions or spiritual belief systems, nor their leaders, founders, or originators, no thought leader, guru, or life coach has ever claimed to be the Son of God. Why not? Because none of them were. Each was wise enough to not make that claim, because they knew it would not be true. We, you and I, can choose anything or anyone to believe in, anyone or anything to put our energies and our hope in, rather than to believe Jesus came for the reasons he said and did. We can choose to believe anything other than the one person the prophets over thousands of years of writing said he would be, the one whose contemporaries saw and recorded what they witnessed firsthand while physically with him, and the one whom God in heaven declares he would provide for the world. But as William Shakespeare said, therein lies the rub. You see, we're each given free will to choose, to have faith in these facts and declarations or not. You may choose to think that part of the Bible or the entirety of the Bible is part of today's ever-increasing flow of misinformation and disinformation. You may choose to think that Scripture is false, fake, fabricated, or fabled. But choosing to believe that the words of Christ are untrue and therefore not applicable to you or me is a tenuous position. The two questions I get most often are, how can I start a spiritual walk, and how can I read the Bible? Today, I'm going to share how easy both of these can be. So let's get started. At its core, a spiritual relationship with God must be voluntary on our part. You see, God will never coerce you, cajole you, connive you, or con you into believing in Him and His Word. His plan is for you to believe and accept Him in your heart and with your conscious mind, not by tricks or threats, as many religions would have you believe, but by a simple, voluntary choice. And you don't need approval from a priest, pastor, or pope. You don't need the okay or go ahead from your parents, your peers, or your political propagandists. You don't need permission from family, friends, neighbors, or the guy on the corner with the sign declaring the end is near. You don't need confirmation from a group, association, or conclave. And you don't need to be a member of a church, fellowship, or ecumenical study group telling you that this choice is okay. You simply ask Christ to come into your life. The choice to believe or not is yours. But starting or restarting a spiritual relationship with God, again, must be voluntary on our part. That's what free will is about. Free to choose, free to decide, free to follow, free to emulate, or not. And best of all, free to turn away from God or choose differently. You see, many people throughout our world and throughout history have been taught to think or believe that a spiritual relationship with God is unattainable or only attainable through a religion or spiritual system headed by priests, pastors, popes, rabbis, imams, or some other group or cult personality. Nothing could be further from the truth. You can start or restart a living, vibrant, and personal relationship with God anytime, any day, anywhere, with 5 easy to understand and follow scripturally sound steps. Do these 5 steps, and you can start a new life on a spiritually grounded path, one that will provide knowledge, peace, love, and awareness, of how to live your life without stress, struggle, pressure, or conflict. But you must be willing to reach outside of yourself, outside of the world you live in and are surrounded by, outside of narrow thinking and cloistered beliefs of right and wrong. You see, it's not until our current age that people have had access to information instantaneous, where belief options and behavior models are practically unlimited. And with this in mind, know that God never intended his character and nature to be a mystery. He shows himself visibly in the flesh and the examples of Christ Jesus, what he said and what he did. God never intended to make life's fundamental relationships complicated. You see, God's intent is always to make the complicated easy to follow. It's man's provincial and parochial proclivities, rooted in self-centeredness and self-indulgent views and schemes, that are spurred on by his insatiable desire for power, greed, and control, that moves men to make the simple complicated. This is the way of the world. It's these ways that lead to false presumption that those in power hold the keys, the answers, and the solutions. Well, if you watch one day of news, you'll realize that those in power are flying by the seat of their pants from crisis to crisis. And yet, in the face of worldwide lies, fabrications, and deceit, God's love for you is so great, he's provided 5 easy steps for you and your family and those you care for to establish or reestablish a spiritual relationship with him. So if you've ever thirsted for understanding, if you've ever hungered for truth, if you've ever been told you are unworthy to be in God's spiritual presence, all that changes right now. So join me next week when I describe these 5 steps that you and your loved ones can use to ensure the Lord's blessings and protection here and hereafter. You know, it's been said the Bible stands for basic instructions before leaving earth, and it can be for the discerning mind. But the Bible is not a story. It's not a novel, meaning you don't have to start at page 1 and read to the end. You can begin anywhere. Now, that said, most people want an easy place to start. So here's a suggestion that's worked for many. Perhaps it'll work for you. First, get a red letter edition Bible. This is one where Jesus' words are printed in red. Now, you'll only find this in the 4 New Testament Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The first 3 Gospel books, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are called the Synoptic Gospels, meaning they textually share similar content, scope, and presentation of the events in the life of Christ, while sharing about his teachings and parables. The 4th Gospel, John, is the how and why roadmap to a spiritual relationship. So, get a red letter edition. Here's what you do. Start in Matthew and read only the red sections. Skip all the black sentences and paragraphs. Then do the same with Mark, Luke, and John. Now, it may sound odd, but you'll quickly get the flow. And by skipping the black sections, you'll soon discover what Jesus wants you to know about a spiritual relationship with him and a relationship with others. When you're finished with the last red section in John, you'll be ready to start a new spiritual walk. Now, if you want to go deeper, go back and now reread John again in its entirety. Because unlike other texts, John's gospel shares and teaches about the role Jesus plays in the Trinity, in his ministry, and how to develop a spiritual relationship. Want more? Then go and read the books of Romans and Hebrews. These will describe life 2,000 years ago with the same problems and issues that we face today, and how a spiritual relationship can reduce that stress, struggle, and conflict. If you finish Romans and Hebrews and still want more, then go to any of the other New Testament Pauline letters, and you'll soon be on your way to knowing, understanding, and being prepared for the future, your future, as well as the future that God has intended for man and humanity. Now, we're going to take our last commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk about next week. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. Next week, we're going to go through the 5 easy steps of starting or restarting a relationship with the Lord, and the benefits of walking a spiritual path where you and He communicate on an average but easy way to understand. Thanks for joining me today. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we discuss personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. If you know someone who could benefit from today's show, please share it with them. If today's show has been helpful for you, please give us a rating and review. And to know more about my work, I invite you to visit my website, branchisole.com, or my YouTube channel, Branch Isole. Today's show has been sponsored by Crystal Creek Farm. If you have a business, a product, or a service you'd like to share with the world on Small Changes, Big Dividends, simply send your request and your inquiry to the website. You've been watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. Until next week, be in the world, not of the world.
This has been Small Change, Big Dividends. When you're ready for healthier, more successful relationships at home or work, Small Change, Big Dividends is your show. Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.